It happened on a night when I should have felt grateful. The worship had ended. The lights dimmed. People were laughing in the lobby. And I was still sitting there in the dark. Everyone around me looked like they belonged, hands raised, eyes closed, glowing with faith. But I felt nothing. Just emptiness that I couldn't explain. So I whispered the question I'd never dared to ask out loud before. Jesus, am I really loved? Or have I just been pretending all this time? The silence that followed wasn't cruel, it was exposing. I waited for a sign, a verse, some feeling to prove that heaven had heard me. But nothing came, only the faint hum of the air conditioner and the sound of chairs scraping against the floor as people left. I tried to shake it off, smiling at volunteers as they cleaned up, but my chest felt tight. I had spent years teaching about love, singing about it, quoting verses about it. Yet sitting there, alone, I realized I had no idea what it felt like. My whole life had been about proving I was enough for God, enough faith, enough goodness, enough obedience. But love that's earned never feels safe. It disappears the moment you fall short. And that night, I had fallen short of everything except exhaustion. I drove home quietly, the city lights blurring past my windshield, and for the first time, I didn't want another sermon or song. I just wanted to know if I was loved for real, not for what I do, not for what I show, but for who I am when no one's watching. Somewhere deep down, I prayed one more time, not with my lips, but with my soul. If you're real, if you actually love me, show me. The next morning felt no different. The alarm rang, coffee brewed, sunlight poured through the window, but everything inside me was dull. I tried to pray, but the words felt mechanical, rehearsed. Thank you for this day. Guide my steps. The phrases came out empty, like echoes in a hollow room. I sat there staring at the steam from my cup, realizing I had built my entire relationship with God around performance. I could quote every verse about His love. Yet somehow I never believed any of it applied to me. I was good at telling others they were loved. I just didn't know how to believe it for myself. There was a strange kind of comfort in the silence that had followed my question the night before. It was as if heaven wasn't ignoring me, it was waiting for me to stop pretending. For years I thought faith meant filling silence with noise, convincing myself that something was happening even when I couldn't feel it. But now, that silence felt like a mirror. It showed me everything I had been hiding beneath my busyness. Fear, insecurity, a quiet ache for approval. I didn't want love that came from applause anymore. I wanted something real. Later that afternoon, I went for a walk near the park. Families were playing, couples sitting on benches, a group of teenagers laughing near the fountain. Life went on, loud and effortless. While I felt like I was watching it all from the outside, I sat on a bench and whispered under my breath, "What am I missing?" No answer came, only a small wind brushing across my face. For a moment I closed my eyes and let it pass through me. It felt strangely gentle, as if God wasn't far away but simply quiet, close enough for me to notice if I stopped talking. I thought about the way I'd been living, doing everything right, saying all the right things, yet never resting long enough to feel loved. I realized love wasn't something I had to chase, it was something I had been standing in the middle of all along, too distracted to see. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt the same emptiness creep in again. I could have scrolled through my phone or drowned it out with worship music, but instead, I decided to sit in it. I whispered, "Jesus, if silence is all you'll give me, then I'll learn to meet you there." And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like an invitation not to speak, not to perform, but to simply exist and let Him be near. I didn't feel fireworks, I didn't see visions, but something subtle shifted inside me. Maybe love wasn't a feeling to chase. Maybe it was a presence that had been waiting for me to slow down long enough to notice. The following week moved slowly, like time itself had thickened. I went through the motions, recording, meetings, prayers, yet underneath it all, a question pulsed like a heartbeat. When did I stop feeling loved? It was during one of those long, sleepless nights that the memories began to surface. Not in order, not gentle, but raw and uninvited. I saw myself as a child again, standing in the schoolyard, holding out a drawing I was proud of, only to watch the older kids laugh. I remembered the way my stomach had twisted when they said, "You're weird." I laughed it off back then, but a small piece of me decided love was for other people, the ones who fit, who didn't try too hard, who were easy to like. I remembered being a teenager in church, watching others get prayed for, seeing tears fall, hands lifted, voices trembling with emotion. I had stood there, hands in pockets, wondering why I couldn't feel what they felt. Everyone else seemed to have this connection I didn't, so I tried harder, memorized verses, joined worship teams, volunteered for everything. The more I served, the less I felt, and that emptiness began to look like failure. Even years later, success didn't fix it. The invitations, the compliments, the moments on stage, they all gave short bursts of validation that faded before I could breathe them in. Deep down, I wasn't afraid of being forgotten. I was afraid of being known. Because what if the real me, the one behind the words, behind the smiles, wasn't lovable? That thought haunted me. It followed me into adulthood, into ministry, into friendships. Every God loves you, I said to someone else, felt like a truth I was disqualified from. One night, I sat in front of my mirror and studied my own reflection. I didn't see the confident person everyone else saw. I saw the small boy in the schoolyard, still waiting for someone to tell him he was enough. My chest tightened. I whispered to my reflection, "You're not fooling anyone." But then something quiet interrupted the thought, not an audible voice, but a knowing that wasn't mine. It said, "You've been carrying words I never said." The room grew still. I didn't move. Those words pierced through years of noise, straight into the ache. I realized how many of my beliefs about love were built on wounds, not truth. Every moment of rejection had become evidence against God's affection for me. But what if He'd been trying to reach me through the silence all along? I sat there until the first light of morning touched the wall. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to perform. I just sat broken, still, honest. Somewhere in the quiet, I sensed it again, that faint, unexplainable warmth. And this time, I didn't question it. I just let it be. It happened on a night when the weight finally became too heavy to hide. I had spent the day smiling through conversations, giving encouragement I could no longer feel, and rehearsing gratitude for blessings that suddenly seemed hollow. By evening, I was sitting on the floor of my room, surrounded by half-written notes and unread messages, staring at nothing. The silence had grown unbearable. I buried my face in my hands and whispered, "Jesus, I can't keep pretending I'm fine." The words came out trembling, barely louder than a breath, but they carried years of exhaustion. For the first time, I wasn't trying to sound spiritual. I wasn't trying to impress heaven with eloquent prayers. I was just honest. Tears came without warning, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet streams that burned as they fell. I wasn't crying because of pain. I was crying because I had reached the end of my strength. Every wall I had built to appear strong collapsed in that moment. I told him I was tired of trying to earn something he claimed was already mine. "If you really love me," I said, "then I need you to meet me here, in this mess. Not when I'm fixed, not when I'm composed, but now." My chest felt tight, my throat raw, and yet, beneath the ache, there was a strange sense of relief. It was like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. I sat there for what felt like hours, waiting for something to happen. No thunder, no voice, no miracle, just stillness. But in that stillness, something subtle began to shift. The air in the room felt thicker, softer somehow, like peace had form and weight. I felt an almost imperceptible warmth move through my chest, not an emotional high, but a steady, living calm. It wasn't about goosebumps or tears anymore. It was presence, and that presence didn't demand anything from me. It didn't ask me to prove my devotion or apologize for my weakness. It simply stayed. I whispered again, "Why now?" And the answer that came wasn't in words but in understanding that love often waits until performance dies. That Jesus doesn't enter the parts of our life we decorate for Him. He meets us in the rooms we keep locked, the ones that smell of doubt and disappointment. In that moment, I realized He hadn't been distant. I had been distracted. His silence wasn't absence. It was mercy, a space wide enough for my honesty to breathe. I looked around my dimly lit room, the quiet hum of the night pressing against the windows, and whispered, "I don't know how to do this anymore." Somewhere deep inside, I felt the faintest whisper respond, "You don't have to. Just let me love you." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. The next evening, I found myself unable to focus on anything. The world outside my window seemed to move on effortlessly, cars passing, laughter echoing from a nearby cafe, the faint sound of music from a neighbor's apartment. But inside my small room, time stood still. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, still replaying that quiet moment from the night before. The one where I thought I heard Him, not with my ears, but deep within. "Just let me love you." The words haunted me in the gentlest way. Could love really be that simple? Could it be that I had complicated something God meant to be received, not earned? I wasn't sure what to do with that thought. So I did nothing. I just stayed still, breathing in the quiet, afraid that any movement might break the fragile peace that had settled over me. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Then, out of nowhere, I felt it again, that same gentle nearness. The air felt thicker, like someone invisible had entered the room. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it was undeniable. My heart began to race, not from fear but from recognition. I whispered, "Jesus?" There was no response, at least not in the way I expected. Instead, I felt a calm that spread through me like warmth after standing in the cold too long. My breathing slowed. My shoulders loosened. It was as though something sacred was happening without words. In that stillness, a simple truth began to unfold inside me. Love had never been gone. I had just been too busy performing to notice its presence. I remembered the countless times I'd prayed for proof of God's affection, a sign, a miracle, a feeling. But now I understood that love didn't need to announce itself. It wasn't a flash of light or a rush of emotion. It was the quiet assurance that I wasn't alone. For the first time, I realized that the presence I had been chasing was already here, gentle, patient, waiting for my noise to fade. Tears came again, but this time they weren't born from pain. They came from a deep, unexplainable gratitude. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't flawless. But somehow, I felt held. I whispered, "You're really here, aren't you?" And though the room remained silent, something in my heart whispered back, "I never left." I let out a shaky breath, sinking to the floor, palms open in surrender. There were no visions, no booming revelations, just peace, deep and steady. I finally understood that God's love doesn't enter with spectacle. It slips quietly into the cracks of a tired soul. And as I sat there in that soft, sacred silence, I knew that love had not come to visit. It had been living there all along, waiting for me to notice. That night, when I finally fell asleep, It wasn't deep. My body rested, but my spirit stayed awake somewhere between a dream and a vision. I found myself standing in a wide open field, golden and quiet beneath a fading sky. The air felt warm, almost familiar. In the distance, I saw a small figure sitting on a stone step near a broken gate. As I walked closer, I realized it was a child, a boy no older than 8. Knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped around them like he was trying to disappear. His clothes were dusty, his hair messy, his face streaked with tears that had already dried. I stopped a few feet away, unsure if I should speak. But then, the boy looked up, and my heart sank. It was me. Not just a version of me, it was me. The same scar above the eyebrow, the same uncertain eyes I had forgotten I once had. He didn't look surprised to see me. He just whispered, "You took a long time to come back." His voice was small, fragile, and yet it carried through the silence like a confession. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but before I could, another presence appeared, gentle, radiant, familiar. Jesus was standing behind him, not glowing like the images I had seen in paintings, but clothed in a simple robe, eyes filled with a kindness I can't describe. He didn't say anything at first. He simply knelt beside the boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. The child leaned into him like he had been waiting for that touch his whole life. Jesus looked at me and said softly, "This is the part of you that never stopped waiting for love." His words hit something deep, something I didn't know still existed. I knelt down too, suddenly aware of how afraid that boy still was, afraid of being left, afraid of not being enough, afraid that love was something that always came with conditions. Jesus continued, "You grew up trying to protect him, trying to earn what he already had." I felt tears burning in my eyes. I wanted to tell him I didn't know how to fix that. But before I could, he reached out his other hand and touched my chest. The field began to glow faintly, not from the sun, but from within. The warmth spread through me, slow and steady, until it reached the same ache that had lived inside me for years. I could feel that small boy's pain begin to fade, replaced by a peace that was almost heavy with meaning. Jesus looked at both of us and whispered, "You were never unloved. You just stopped believing it." When I woke up, my face was wet with tears, but my heart was calm. The silence that had haunted me for so long no longer felt empty. It felt full of presence, full of peace, full of love. The morning after that dream, I woke with a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't sadness exactly, it was more like everything hidden had finally surfaced. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process what I had seen. The child's face lingered in my mind, the way he looked at me as if I had abandoned him. It was painful to realize that for years I had silenced that part of myself, the tender, fragile part that wanted to be loved without condition. I replaced him with strength, confidence, and control. But now, that small voice was awake again, and I could hear him whispering things I didn't want to hear. "You always have to prove yourself. You always fall short. You're not enough." The words were sharp, familiar, and they echoed through me like accusations. I closed my eyes, gripping the sheets, whispering, "Stop." But they didn't stop. They got louder. It was then that I felt something stir in the room, the same quiet presence I had begun to recognize. Not loud, not forceful, but steady, like the stillness before dawn. I didn't see him, but I knew he was there. The warmth returned, soft and surrounding. And then, in the middle of all that noise in my mind, a single phrase rose above the chaos. "Those are not my words." It was Jesus' voice, gentle, calm, absolute. The accusations fell silent. I opened my eyes, and for a moment, everything inside me went still. I realized I had spent my whole life agreeing with lies spoken by pain. Lies that said I was too broken, too complicated, too much to be loved. But now, The truth began to separate itself from the noise. I whispered into the quiet, "Then why do they sound so real?" And in the stillness, I felt him answer without words, "Because you've heard them longer than you've heard me." The sentence pierced through me. It wasn't condemnation, it was clarity. I understood then that love doesn't accuse. Love doesn't shame. Love doesn't measure. I had been mistaking the voice of fear for the voice of God, and it had left me exhausted. But that morning, something shifted. Every harsh thought, every internal criticism began to lose its authority. I didn't need to fight them. I just needed to stop agreeing with them. I sat there in silence for a long time, breathing slowly, letting that truth sink in. The room felt light, almost sacred. For the first time, I didn't try to fill the space with noise or movement. I just stayed there, listening. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the layers of fear and doubt, I heard something new. A voice that wasn't loud or urgent, but unmistakably real. It said, "You are mine." That single whisper carried more peace than years of striving ever had. I didn't respond this time. I just closed my eyes and let it echo until the stillness became love itself. That night I sat by the window, unable to sleep. The city was quiet except for the soft hum of passing cars and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. I pressed my hand against my chest, right where I had felt his touch in the dream, and whispered, "If you're here, don't let me lose this." The air around me felt thick again, that same quiet weight I had come to recognize not as emptiness, but presence. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe slowly. In that moment, the memory of the boy from my dream returned, but this time he wasn't sitting alone. He was standing beside Jesus, looking up with eyes full of peace. Jesus turned to him and said something I couldn't hear, then looked toward me. And though no words were spoken aloud, I understood perfectly what he meant. "It's time to let me heal what you've been protecting." I felt my throat tighten. It's strange how you can live your whole life guarding pain so fiercely that even when love comes to heal it, part of you resists. I whispered, "I don't know how to let go." The answer came quietly, not as instruction but as invitation. "You don't have to know how. Just let me." Before I could question what that meant, an overwhelming sense of warmth began to move through me. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind of miracle that shakes a room. It was gentler than a whisper, yet stronger than anything I had ever known. It started in my chest, spreading outward, as if light itself had found a home inside me. I could feel it, touching places. Words had never reached memories, disappointments, the unspoken ache I had carried since childhood. Tears began to fall, slow and steady. They weren't born of sadness, but release. For the first time, I wasn't trying to fix myself. I wasn't performing, confessing, or proving anything. I was simply being loved completely, undeservingly, freely. I could almost feel his hand resting over my heart, steady and real. It was like time stood still, and every lie that had ever told me I was unworthy began to dissolve in that touch. The more I wept, the lighter I became, as though love itself was rewriting the story that shame had told. When it was over, I didn't feel exhausted. I felt clean, like the air after rain. I sat in the stillness for a long time, afraid to move, afraid to lose the presence that filled the room. But then I realized something profound. This love wasn't something that visited me. It lived in me. It wasn't a moment to chase. It was a truth to carry. I whispered through the fading quiet, "Thank you for finding me." And though I heard no reply, I could feel him smile. In that silence, I finally understood that being healed didn't mean becoming perfect. It meant being known and still being loved. The next morning, the world looked different, though nothing had changed. The same sunlight poured through the window, the same city sounds drifted in from outside, but everything felt alive in a way it hadn't before. I sat at the kitchen table, still in silence, letting the memory of the night before replay in my mind. His voice, his touch, that overwhelming calm that had washed over me. I couldn't stop thinking about the words he had spoken. You were never unloved. You just stopped believing it. I had heard countless sermons about God's love, but none had ever reached me like that one sentence did. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was truth. Living. Breathing. Undeniable. I finally understood what it meant when Scripture says perfect love casts out fear. Fear had been my language for so long that I forgot what peace sounded like. But now, peace had a voice, and it was whispering in the quiet. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. Show me what love really means, I said softly. And before the words had even left my mouth, I felt an understanding bloom inside me, not a vision this time, but a knowing. Love wasn't the rush of emotion I had chased all my life. It wasn't found in applause or approval, or even in the comfort of feeling needed. It was present, steady, patient, unchanging. Love was not God's reaction to me. It was His nature expressed toward me. I realized then how much I had misunderstood Him. I had pictured His love like a reward that increased when I was good and withdrew when I failed. But real love doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't measure. It simply is. I thought about how often I had prayed for signs, for open doors, blessings, success, all the things I thought would prove His affection. But now, sitting there in the quiet, I realized I didn't need proof. I was the proof. The fact that He had stayed through my silence, through my confusion, through my unworthiness, that was love. It wasn't sentimental or fragile. It was the kind of love that holds you when you fall apart and never lets go. It was patient enough to wait for years until I finally stopped running long enough to notice. A soft breeze moved through the room, lifting the edge of the curtain. It reminded me of that night in the park when I first felt His nearness but didn't understand it. Now I knew that gentle wind was the same love that had followed me through every season, even the ones where I didn't want to be found. I whispered into the quiet, "So this is what you meant." And for the first time, I didn't ask for anything else. I just sat there, letting love become more than an idea. It was real. It was present. It was Him. That evening, I went for a walk under the fading light. The sun was sinking behind the rooftops, washing the sky in shades of gold and rose. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to hurry. The air was cool and alive, carrying the faint scent of rain. I wandered without direction, my thoughts quiet, my heart still. I kept thinking about how Jesus had taken the weight I'd been carrying, that invisible burden of trying to be worthy. It was strange to realize how heavy it had been only once it was gone. For years, I had lived beneath the pressure of perfection, performing faith like a role I could never quite master. But now, that weight had lifted. I could breathe again, and in the stillness, I began to understand what had truly happened the night He touched my heart. It wasn't that He had given me something new. It was that He had taken something from me: the fear, the guilt, the endless striving. In its place, He left peace. As I walked along the narrow street, a thought came quietly to mind. Love is not found in effort, but in exchange. Every day, we hand over our pain, our anxiety, our control, and He gives us back rest. It is the most uneven trade in the universe, and yet He never hesitates. I stopped near a small garden by the edge of the road, watching the last light settle on the flowers. For so long, I thought surrender meant failure, that letting go of control meant weakness. But as I stood there, I realized surrender was the purest form of trust. It was saying, I believe you love me enough to hold what I can't. I closed my eyes and whispered, here it is, all of it. I imagined myself handing him everything I had clung to. The expectations, the hidden guilt, the fear of being unseen. It wasn't a dramatic prayer, just a quiet release. And in that moment, something shifted again. It was as if the air inside me changed. I could feel a lightness spreading through my chest. A freedom that had nothing to do with circumstances and everything to do with love. When I opened my eyes, I noticed how still everything had become. The noise of the city seemed to fade, replaced by an almost tangible peace. The flowers swayed slightly in the breeze, and I smiled, realizing that even nature seemed to breathe easier when you finally stop fighting love. I turned to walk home, feeling lighter with every step, like something invisible had been exchanged between heaven and earth. I didn't have all the answers, but I didn't need them anymore. For the first time, I was learning that love isn't proven by control or certainty. It's revealed in surrender. And that surrender, I realized, was the truest form of freedom. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the cross. I had seen it my whole life, hanging above altars, engraved on jewelry, printed on shirts and church banners, but I had never really looked at it. Not like this. I sat on my couch, staring at the small wooden cross on my shelf, its shadow stretched across the wall in the dim light. For the first time, I didn't see it as a symbol of religion or duty. I saw it as a love letter written in suffering. Every wound, every drop of blood, every breath, he struggled to take it all, spoke the same message. This is how far I went to show you that you are loved. I realized that the cross wasn't proof of how guilty I was. It was proof of how wanted I was. It wasn't about shame. It was about belonging. I closed my eyes, and in that stillness, the image deepened. I saw him there, not distant, not untouchable, but heartbreakingly human. His eyes were full of pain and mercy all at once, and somehow, I knew he saw me too. Not the version of me that stood on stages or said all the right things, but the version I kept hidden, the one who doubted, who tried to earn love, who feared being seen for what I truly was. And yet, even knowing all of that, his gaze didn't carry disappointment. It carried affection. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, "You did that for me." The words felt too small for the weight of what I was seeing. He didn't answer, but I didn't need him to. The cross was the answer. Every unspoken question, every ache, every moment I wondered if I was truly loved, it had all been answered 2,000 years ago on that hill. Love had already proven itself. I had just been too focused on my own failures to see it. As I sat there in the dark, I realized something else, that love isn't meant to be understood. It's meant to be received. I had spent so much of my life trying to comprehend how God could love someone like me. But love doesn't make sense. It isn't logical. It's extravagant, unfair, and beautifully wasteful. And that's what makes it divine. I stayed there for a long time, the silence thick with peace. The more I stared at the cross, the more it felt alive, not as a symbol of death, but as a heartbeat that never stopped echoing. I whispered one final time, "I believe you now." And as the words left my lips, I felt the faintest warmth in my chest, spreading slowly until it filled every part of me. It was as if love itself had leaned forward and whispered back, "I always did." The next morning, I woke before the Sunday. The room was still, wrapped in that soft blue light that comes just before dawn. For a few seconds, I forgot everything, where I was, what day it was, what had happened. Then it all came rushing back, not like a memory, but like peace. Returning home, I sat up slowly, expecting the familiar heaviness to greet me. But it didn't. Instead, there was a quiet stillness inside me, like a lake that had finally stopped trembling after a storm. I walked to the mirror and paused. For years, I had looked into that reflection and seen someone who was never quite enough, never wholly enough, strong enough, kind enough. But this time, I didn't see the performer. I didn't see the preacher. I didn't see the broken boy trying to prove his worth. I just saw a person loved by God. And somehow, that was enough. I whispered to my reflection, "You don't have to try so hard anymore." The words weren't dramatic or planned. They just came out naturally, as if they'd been waiting on my tongue for years. I smiled not because everything was perfect, but because I finally didn't need it to be. The weight that had followed me for so long was gone. I felt lighter, freer, as if the air itself was different. I opened the window, and the cold breeze filled the room. The morning smelled like rain and beginnings. Birds were starting to sing in the distance, and their song felt like a conversation I was finally a part of. As the light grew, I realized how simple it all was. Love had not arrived through lightning or visions or signs. It had crept in quietly, through surrender, through silence, through the moments I least expected it. I had spent years searching for some grand confirmation of God's affection, but now I knew it was never meant to be proven. It was meant to be lived. Every breath, every sunrise, every act of mercy I had ever received was love speaking to me. I had just never learned to listen. I sat back on the bed and closed my eyes. I thought about that little boy from the dream, the one who had waited alone for so long. I could still see his face, but now he was smiling. I imagined Jesus standing beside him, hand on his shoulder, both of them looking straight at me. And then I realized they weren't separate from me anymore. That boy had been healed. That man had been found. That love had never left. The world outside was awake now, but I stayed still for a while longer, soaking in the quiet. There was no voice this time, no vision, no warmth, just peace. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that stays. And for the first time, I didn't need to ask if I was loved. I knew. Days passed, and life began to move again. Errands, phone calls, conversations, responsibilities. But everything felt quieter now. Not empty, just clearer. The noise that used to fill my mind, the doubts, the striving, the need to prove had softened. Love had found its place there, steady and unshakable. I started noticing it everywhere, in places I had never thought to look. In the warmth of sunlight spilling across the floor, in the laughter of strangers at a cafe, in the sound of rain tapping against the window while I prayed in silence. It was as if the whole world had been whispering, "I love you" all along, and I had just been too busy to hear it. The love I once begged for had not arrived in a single miraculous moment. It had always been woven through the ordinary. And now, with every breath, I felt it. I didn't need proof anymore. I was living in it. One evening, I sat at my desk with an open journal and wrote words I never thought I would mean. "I am loved." I stared at them for a long time. They weren't a declaration of pride. They were a confession of truth. I realized that love was never something to be earned or kept through perfection. It was a gift that had been mine since the beginning, not because I was good, but because He was. Jesus had not come to make me lovable. He had come to show me that I already was. I thought about the boy from my dream, the one who had waited for love. He no longer sat alone now. In my mind, I saw him running through the field, free, laughing, his burdens gone. That image stayed with me like a promise that when love finally reaches the parts of you that stopped believing, you don't just get healed, you get whole. I looked out the window as night settled in. The sky was scattered with stars, and for a moment I felt small, in the best way possible, a soul known, seen, and cherished by something infinite. I whispered softly, "Thank you." No performance, no striving, just gratitude. That's what love does. It quiets the soul until gratitude becomes the only language left. And maybe that's the message I was meant to share all along. If you've ever wondered whether you're really loved, you are. You don't have to earn it, prove it, or chase it. It's already yours. Let Him in, even in the places that still ache. Let Him show you the love that doesn't change when you fail or fade when you doubt. Because once you finally see it, once you feel it for yourself, you'll never question it again. If this story spoke to something deep inside you, it wasn't an accident. Maybe this was your reminder too that Jesus has loved you all along. Stay close, and if you want to keep walking through stories like this, subscribe, and let's keep growing closer to Him together.